quick introductory note that I split this interview up into two parts. The first part will go on integrating presence. The second part will be on innerskilled.com. That's INNERSKILED. And so be sure to check out the second part on Innerskilled. Wholeness, welcome. This is Josh of Integrating Presence and now innerskilled.com. And today I have an old friend with me, and we're going to talk today about lucid dreaming. And my friend is a psychologist, a practicing professional psychologist in the United States. And I want to ask, just jump right in here right away. And how did you get into lucid dreaming, and how does it relate to your work? And you can tell people a little bit about yourself and your work, and then also give a definition of lucid dreaming.
Yeah, so lucid dreaming, a lot of people that don't do it or haven't heard of it may not. It can be kind of difficult to describe, but over the years, so I got into dreaming, remembering my dreams, or writing down, recording dreams in my late teens, early 20s, and I'm 45 now, so it's been years of recording dreams and all this stuff, trying to get lucid. And what does it really mean is the best way I could describe it is if you reference your state of consciousness now, like your level of awareness of where you are, who you are, and your conscious faculties, let's say, like your ability to decide and choose what to do and what to say and when you're going to do it, just conscious action in your waking life. You can take that level of conscious action or those conscious faculties into a dream state where you just sort of become aware. There's different degrees of awareness, but for full lucidity, when you're in a dream state and you're fully aware that it's a dream and you're fully aware of yourself as you know it in waking life, that's kind of the epitome of lucid dreaming. And I think that's what everybody kind of aims for when they want a lucid dream, is how do I become so clear and so conscious and so aware that it's basically like I'm awake inside of a dream. And then there's all sorts of things that go on from there. People choose to do all sorts of things. It's kind of like a land of imagination. And so I kind of got into it because the idea it was a fascinating idea. What got me into it, and what I've kind of sort of been poking around online and talking to other people, and sort of what gets other people into it, is, for me particularly, there was a lot of creative ideas happening in a dream state that I couldn't remember when I woke up. I could remember that I had a creative idea. I could remember something creative happening with music or with visual art, but I couldn't really remember the details. And I thought, well, if I could get lucid and just sort of evoke it, I could take it back with me. And that's what inspired me to start doing it. And then when I started doing it, I kind of discovered it's not, some people are lucky and they can just decide that they're going to be conscious in a dream and they can just do it. I got a couple friends like that. They go to bed at night and they decide they want to become lucid, and they wake up inside of a dream and they do it. I had to work at it. I had to do a lot of practices around going to bed at the right time, like a certain time, to get enough sleep, and then kind of wake up early in the morning around 4 or 5 in the morning, and then meditate my way back into it. And that took practice. There's all sorts of things that people take, like supplements, like huperzine A or galantamine, things like that. I think another one is like B12 or B6, I think. There's all these things people can do to kind of boost the chemistry to be awake in a dream, or quote unquote awake. So there's like a practice of this. And yeah, it's essentially, you do what you will with it, but to get there, you may have to work harder or less hard to achieve that state. And then once you achieve it, you can practice becoming more and more and more conscious in the dream state. And then that gets into sort of like Tibetan dream yoga, where they're like, I've read, I don't know anybody that does this, but I've read that they practice becoming fully conscious both day and night through waking and dream states. It's a continued consciousness.
we've talked about that before, and how to enter that it's supposedly possible to enter the dream state completely conscious. And
Yeah, oh
but
yeah.
let's rewind here and go back kind of to the beginning. The only thing I've really done on dreams before was someone asked a question: what are thoughts? Are thoughts like dreams? So I'll link that to the show notes. The basic fundamental question is, besides how this plays into reality in general, you know, about like dream time and waking life, things like this, and dreamless sleep, is why bother doing this? You know, you mentioned
Yeah.
creativity, but what are some of the other reasons you and other people like to do lucid dreaming?
So yeah, it can range, like you said, everything from creativity to just having fun. Some people just like having fun in the dream world. There can be creativity. It's also for spiritual growth. Um, you know, I did get pretty interested in like sort of a more Jungian, Carl Jung kind of Jungian bend on things for a while, where it can also be seen as sort of an interplay, like a conscious interplay with your unconscious mind, with all of the world of unconsciousness. And you can, according to him, kind of theoretically interact with archetypes or the relationships that your unconscious mind has to these archetypes. And you can explore those relationships for personal growth. So that's one way to take it. Another interesting way to take it is possible to go from a lucid dream into the astral plane. And then the astral plane becomes its own kind of exploration, you could say. Generally speaking, the dream world and the astral plane are thought of as two different states of consciousness, or two different dimensions, or however you want to word it. And you can enter astral plane from lucid dreaming. So some people do that. And then on the astral plane, they have other aspirations that we could get into, because that's part of the experience that I had with some clients in my practice. But so there's that. Yeah, it's almost kind of limitless as what you can really, as to what you can do in a dream world, or what you do with it and what it means to you. But I would say those are the most common things: spiritual, personal growth, or creativity.
Cool. Let's start with some kind of the basics too. Like you already mentioned some techniques and things for doing this. I've heard of now you keep a dream journal, and you're talking about the technique of kind of waking up in the middle of the night and meditating back. There's a technique called mild, I think.
Yeah, mnemonic
If you
induction.
just might as well just go through the techniques, and then you can go into the technology. And the reason I want to ask about the technology, because I have a meditation Q&A coming up about augmented meditation methods, and so that's going to be some research for that. So there's that, and then once we just kind of go through the list there, and you can, if you anything worth mentioning about pros and cons in your experience to these. I also heard about transcranial stimulation, and there's anyway, you know way more about this than I do. Then I want to go into some of the how to work with this on an archetypal level in a Jungian sense. But let's do the techniques.
Yeah, techniques wise, there's a plethora of them. If you kind of Google or YouTube, lucid dreaming techniques, tons of them. The more common ones, I would say, are like what you mentioned, mild, which is like a mnemonic induction. There's wild, which was what I kind of practiced, which is like wake induced or wake initiated lucid dreaming. There's I guess you could say chemical, like using huperzine A or galantamine or some combination of. There's a book written. I don't know the author's name off the top of my head, but it's like something like Advanced Lucid Dreaming with Supplements. The title, we could put it in the information of the podcast. There's a book that you could buy. He talks about combinations of things using like nicotine and galantamine and alpha GPC, and there's all these types of combinations you can try in cocktails. Mnemonic induction, that's kind of where you basically develop what's called your perspective memory. So you develop your ability to remember something, to remember a future event. So like, a lot of people think of memory as the past. Like I'm remembering what happened or a set of circumstances, or I'm recalling something that I already have experienced. Perspective memory is more of a mindfulness practice of when something happens or when I notice something, I'm going to remember to do something. So, and that obviously fits into the lucid dreaming realm, where when you practice building up your memory enough, you can say, keep a dream journal so you can increase your recall of dreams. And then after enough dreams, you find kind of like common themes. So common theme in my dream, for example, is I'm always talking to people. I'm always engaged with people. They're always around. So that would be what would be called a dream symbol, for example, or like a recurring dream theme. And then I might use that for a mnemonic, where I might go, all right, every day in my daily life, when I find myself talking to someone, or when I'm in a situation where I'm talking to someone, I'll ask myself if I'm dreaming. I'll heighten my conscious awareness around whether this is reality and I'm awake, or whether I'm dreaming. And you can make a habit of that every day. And you build up your memory around that so much that in a dream state, you kind of maybe like automatically just pose that level of awareness. It just becomes automatic. That technique also includes this sort of wake back to bed technique, where you sleep maybe 4 or 5 hours, you wake up, and then as you're going back to sleep, you recite in your mind, the next time I'm talking to someone or with people, I'll know that I'll be dreaming. And you kind of do this sort of mantra as you fall asleep. Well, after having built up your memory every day around talking to people and heightening your consciousness about wake versus dream, the idea is that going to sleep with that mantra early in the morning and meditating on it will be enough to consciously kind of cross over that awareness into a dream state, where you're in front of somebody. Me, for example, I'm in front of some people, and it's so fresh in my mind and the memory's been so built up that it triggers this awareness that I'm dreaming. So that's like a very rough like overview of the mild technique.
And you mentioned reality testing in there too, right? And
yeah,
then also,
yeah.
This is kind of like a trigger or a marker as well. And then you take it to the next level with meditation and having built that muscle. Okay, continue.
Yeah, the reality testing thing. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to reality test. Like in my dreams, for example, my hands are always kind of distorted. Most people's are. Their fingers are, they have more than 5 fingers, or they're kind of crooked or whatever. So checking your hands in daily life a few times is a good reality test. Or some people will try to push their finger through their hand, or they'll plug their nose and try to breathe, or all these things that, or look at like something written, like fine print or a stop sign or something, and then kind of look away and look back again. Light switch. Mm-hmm. These types of things that you can do to test whether you're dreaming or not. I have found that the actual reality test itself doesn't really trigger my awareness of whether I'm dreaming or not. What really does it is just the subtle shift in awareness, this subtle kind of posing the question, is enough to kind of kick up an awareness of like this sort of wait a minute moment. This light bulb goes off, like, wait, I'm in a dream. I have used the reality testing things like my hands and stuff to sort of reassure myself that I'm still dreaming. I've been in vivid enough dreams before where I was going to, like, let's say, fly out of a window, but it was such a vivid dream, I took pause a couple of times and had to recheck my reality on this, because I didn't want to jump out of a window. It was kind of this sort of vivid quality to the dream. So I'll use reality checking like that to kind of keep myself aware that I'm dreaming. But the actual event of shifting into a conscious awareness is a very subtle moment, just an awareness shift kind of. So that's a reality testing thing.
Yeah, definitely start flying before you go out the window. So if you fly in the room,
right, you just float in the room before
So this is before we get into the technological stuff, I want to backtrack here and talk about recall. And then for me, a lot of times, I've had fully controllable lucid dreams. It seems that way, right?
Yeah.
Not that many, but I do have even more of it. Hey, I'm dreaming. oh, I'm in a dream now. But what happens now, or what happens, I don't know when exactly, is when I realize that, I wake up. Oh, I'm
Yes,
dreaming.
right.
This isn't real. I wake up. So
Yeah.
that's what's happened more now. And I find I dream less with a meditation practice and need less sleep as well. The
Mm.
other thing is, I, some days I know that I'm dreaming, of course, but I just cannot remember it. I think one of the things that I would be helpful is to train my mind when I wake up is not to discard it as just a dream, and to
Yes.
actually have value of it, and of course
Right.
journaling it. And so I've gotten to this habit now of just writing it off. Oh, that's just kind of a nonsense
Yeah.
dream, or really,
Yep.
or actually I'll remember it and then I'll even tell my fiance about it. But then if I don't write it down, it just it's just like
It's gone.
anything else. Yeah, exactly. So what
Yeah.
about recall?
It's an interesting neurochemistry around dreaming that I don't think people fully understand. The one thing I think that there is a pretty good solid consensus on is dream recall and awareness of the dreaming state has a lot to do, or at least there's a major player in it, which is called acetylcholine. And acetylcholine has been a neurochemical that's been linked to, it's a catecholamine that's been linked to like short-term memory for specific. So like this you can't get it anymore. I think like last week, I think galantamine was taken off of the over-the-counter market and it was made prescription. So you used to be able to get this on Amazon and you could get 4 milligrams or 8 milligrams. They just found some variance in like the dosing, the amount you're getting. Some researchers kind of bought some off of Amazon and found that the dosing was off and wasn't accurate marketing. So they just pulled the plug on it. Now it's prescription. But for many years, you could get this over the counter, and it's what's called an acetylcholinesterase inhibitor. So it blocks the enzyme that breaks down acetylcholine. So huperzine A does the same thing, and that's still over the counter. And they act as slightly different, but generally the same effect. And it helps not just with memory recall or memory recall in general. So galantamine is like an Alzheimer's drug, basically, that's prescribed in doses much higher than you'd use for lucid dreaming. But it's a memory drug per se, I guess. And what's happening when you take something like that is you're remembering, you're not going unconscious. For whatever reason, you're just remembering the process of falling asleep, which is interesting because in meditative practices, particularly like Eastern practices, falling asleep consciously or keeping an awareness through the sleep cycle and into the next day is it's a part of some practices, and you'd probably know more about that than I would, that part of things. But I know that it is. And so one thing I can say about recall generally, if you don't have like a drug to do it for you, meditation, mindfulness meditation will increase memory function in general. But then also, when you do something in your daily life over and over again, your brain starts to kind of myelinate all the connections to doing that thing. And your brain starts to get the message that that's a priority, that it's something important, and to dedicate resources to doing, whether it's practicing an instrument or whatever it is that you're doing, mathematics problems, or memory, like perspective memory. The more you do it, the more over and over your brain goes, okay, this must be important. Dedicate more resources to doing it, myelinate more pathways to doing it. And so, like, say, keeping a dream journal, if you're waking up every day and you're thinking about your dream and you're thinking about what happened and you're writing it down, every detail you can remember over and over every morning, that becomes really important to your brain. And it will start to make adaptations to start remembering more and more of your dreams. And I've gotten to the point now where I can remember maybe like 5 to 7 different dreams throughout the night and write them all down or whatever, because it just made it important to my brain to do that. So with recall, a dream journal itself won't make you lucid or increase your awareness in the dream state, but it will enrich your memory of those experiences, which is essential in eventually becoming lucid, because you have to remember the dreams to be lucid to begin with. So recall is important in that step, at least.
So habit patterns, right? And what's
Yeah.
important in life. And I think the Buddha put it this way, something like, whatever one frequently thinks and ponders upon becomes the inclination of the mind.
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
And,
Exactly.
so this notion of what you're talking about in meditation practices in some traditions, the practice I've been told about, and it's a really fascinating one, very simple, is paying attention. See if you can be conscious of the last breath before you go into dream
Remember you
state.
told me that. Yeah, you mentioned that.
Yes, I've never been able to do it, but I have been
Hard.
able to upon awakening, know if it's an in or an out breath. So
Yes.
that's a little bit easier, especially
And
for
now
me.
that's closer to what the technique of wild would be, which is awake initiated, where you're paying such conscious attention to those final moments before falling asleep that some people build up an ability to retain their awareness all the way through that sleep phase, sleep paralysis, and into the dream state or REM cycle.
Awesome. And I think the importance is really huge here, because anything we really value and find important in life and that we're going to go out of our way to put energy into and have a dedication and a training and a practice, of course, is going to have an effect on this. Now,
Yeah.
the other thing is, you said a certain amount of dreams you can remember a night. I could remember times when I had some very interesting dreams. Well, everybody says that though, right? Um, like, where do you draw the line sometimes? Or I don't even know how the cycles traditionally work. Will there be a set amount of time where you go into dreamless sleep before another dream starts? Or do you just draw the line where it changes so much and it's seemingly completely, it just transitioned maybe to very quickly, and then you consider that a new dream? Or how do you draw the line and delineate here between, okay, start of one dream, end of one dream, then start of another dream, end of another dream? Is it always cut and dry, or subjective? Or
It's very hard to say. So usually what dreams happen in typically sequences. So like when you have, and I may go on a little bit of a ramble here, so stop me if it gets a little bit. I'm talking about memory. When your memory is compromised for whatever reason, whether it's from like age related, or whether too much time has passed, or you experienced a really like heavy trauma, when memory is compromised in some way, it becomes sort of like choppy or episodic, or like, you remember a moment, or you remember 10 minutes, things like that. There's a whole like magnitude of like how that can manifest. But generally speaking, memory gets less continuous as it gets impaired, to the point where you just don't remember it at all. And so with dreaming stuff and dreaming sequences, because there's some form of, and I don't know why this is, there's some form of memory impairment around that state. Generally, like we were talking about, you can build it up with dream journals and you can remember longer sequences. But typically what happens in my experience anyway is I'll remember one continuous sequence. I remember each moment after the next, after the next, after the next. Like I was walking here, I was doing this, then I turned and talked to this person, then we went over here, then we walked up into a building, and then it sort of ends. There's no more memory after that last moment. And then I'm in a completely different scene, completely different people, or completely different setup or circumstance. So there's these like chunks of memory, and I'll wake up having remembered a few of those, several maybe, of these separate sort of, like you could think of them as like movie scenes, these movie sequences where it's like a 5 or 6 different storyboards, and each one seems kind of unrelated to the next. Even though in the moment, if you were to kind of like, let's say, go back and relive the whole dreaming cycle, the whole REM cycle, you may find links between them if you could remember it. Or, and there's another interesting thing I want to say about that, but you might find links, or what also kind of tends to be the case is that I was listening to a sleep researcher on a podcast talk about how he believes, I think whatever research he's doing, that we have memory of every single moment of every single dream, but you just don't remember that much of it because of the changes in the neurochemistry. Why that is, nobody really knows why that would be suppressed or why it would be kind of like impaired or whatever. But and maybe somebody does, but I don't. And so like there's just, you kind of remember these chunks and you can get better at remembering those chunks. And then over time, I guess according to some of these like sort of people that are doing like, really deeply into Eastern meditation, Tibetan dream yoga, they can carry consciousness through the whole cycle, through the whole sleep cycle. And it's incredible really to think about, but they dedicate so much of their life to doing this that they can just sort of remember the whole sequence all the way up into waking life again. It's remarkable to me, but it's an interesting question you pose about like, how do you know the difference between each sequence or when one starts and the next stops? It's really about how episodic your memory is and where you can find the links or commonalities between the scenes happening. The other thing that kind of, I think, could confuse people or maybe kind of sort of to cast another angle on that question of like, where does the sequence sort of begin and end? Dream environments are very unstable. So that's something that you can use to your advantage in lucid dreaming is if this is a dream and we're talking on this podcast and this is kind of a dream world, I may just look behind me and it's a desert, or I'll turn around, I'll look behind me. It's kind of a wall. Okay, it's my room, but then I'll look back again and you're completely somebody else. There's not even a computer in front of me. It's such an unstable environment that sometimes I wonder if these changes in sequences are just changes in the environment as you change your perspective on things. That's something I've actually learned really interestingly, that the main difference I've experienced with the dream world and the astral plane is kind of like a double of our reality. And it doesn't change much. It's a pretty stable environment. I've been in the astral plane pretty clearly where I was in my bedroom and I was walking up and down the hallway and checking out my bedroom and going back and forth, and nothing was changing. Nothing was evolving. My hands were they looked like my waking hands. It was a very stable, almost hyper real environment. There were some minor differences, like maybe my window was shifted over a little bit than where it used to be or something, or where it is in waking life, but it was a pretty accurate double and it was stable. I think in a dream world, it's very unstable. You can spawn people, spawn objects, you can change scenes quickly. And so that is kind of, I think, responsible for maybe why it's difficult to tell, or why you have so many different narratives. And I wake up with like 7 different dreams. Are they different dreams? I'm not sure. They're just 7 different sequences, however long I remember them, that kind of seem unrelated to each other.
Good comprehensive dive into that. Now, before we get into the high strangeness, a few more things. Now, you haven't mentioned any of the technical. I keep backtracking, looping back for. I guess I'm too much of a completionist here. Isn't there some kind of device you put on your eyes and it blinks? But since actually that's too much of a transition,
the Nova Dreamer.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
it is. That there's you. Do you use any of these devices? Is there anything?
I tried. There was something called a REM Dreamer, and then there was like the Nova Dreamer that was made by Stephen LaBarge at the Lucidity Institute. He came up with this thing. Supposedly was supposed to come up with a second one or a third or a second one, but it hasn't. I don't know what happened to it. There is an idea that you can wear a mask, and so like this kind of ties into the mild technique where the light. So there's a motion sensor in the mask, and when it detects your eyes going back and forth in a REM cycle, it sets the motion sensor off and it flashes this red light. And you can, of course, set the duration and the intensity or whatever, the brightness. And you could pair it with sound, I think. And it flashes behind your eyelids. And that creates a red or whatever light kind of flashing in your dream. So what you would have to do in your waking life, theoretically, is you'd have to condition your perspective memory. Ask yourself if you're dreaming, when you see flashing lights, stop lights, brake lights, room lights, strobe lights, whatever it is. When there's lights flashing, signs, it triggers a reality test, a shift in your awareness of that conscious question: am I dreaming? And you may be remarkably surprised how little you think about that when you're going through your daily life on automatic pilot. But when you start becoming aware of that question, when those flashing lights occur, you put this mask on and you start dreaming, and you see these flashing lights in your dream. The idea is that it triggers that awareness. I've tried those, and it's no different. It would be no different than, let's say, if I always have people in my dream and I'm testing my reality and people are always around. It's a similar concept. I think it's a way of creating a dream sign for you to test your reality to.
Good point. Yeah, it depends on how much you want to train that sign, I guess, too.
Yeah.
Now, what is this? I also have heard some practitioners that can even advanced meditators that are aware of the dreamless state too.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that blows my mind too. That
That's
just
a very
be
interesting
continuously aware of this
Yeah.
dreamless state, right? And then transitioning into a dream state and then out of a dream state. Pretty wild.
Yeah. I think
mhm.
Buddha. I remember something about the Buddha. I heard some yoga practitioner. It may have even been Sadhguru who was talking about the Buddha making mention of this, of something about encountering entities on the astral plane through his awareness in meditation. I don't know how deeply he's written about it, but it's something he mentioned.
Well, there's all kinds of stories in the suttas and the Theravada tradition about devas and,
Yeah.
hell realms and, even Brahma realms. There's 31 different realms in the Buddhist cosmology. And even Mara, his like arch enemy that he had to kind of defeat through his final enlightenment. And of course, people are really, a lot of people are really kind of, they don't go where that's a literal thing of a different realm. A lot of people take it as a psychological, but I'm open to, all different types of interpretations of what that is.
Yeah.
So before we get into the astral stuff more deeply here, I wanted to see about the memory aspect. In general, I could ask, well, what does this say about, what does the memory in the dream state say about memory in general? But I mean, this is a huge, another podcast in and of itself, probably a huge series, because memory to me, it seems pretty elusive and we don't know. I don't think there's any like definitive, evidence of what it is, but in your opinion, like,
Not really.
where is it even stored? I've heard things like it's in the body, there's cellular memory. I've heard, some people say the brain, some people say it's actually non-local. You throw in quantum mechanics, it just gets really weird.
Yeah.
You have people that can, these savants, you could say, like 3 years ago, 2 months, a week, and 3 days at 5 o'clock, what were you doing? And they just instant recall of exactly down to the detail. And it's just, so, I mean, what's worth saying in this context?
Yeah, there's even practices in there's Eastern practices, and I'm sure you would know that people remember their past lives. They regress all the way through memory to past life.
Well, absolutely. That's one of the techniques I hear too, is you just start going back as far as you can remember in this life. And then their memory is so good, they can trace themselves back into the womb, to the moment of conception. And then it's the moment right before that would then start to the death moment of the past life. And they can trace it all the way back, that life, and just keep going back and back and back, tracing it back.
That's mind blowing. Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't
really
it? I mean, super advanced practitioners who have, a lot of them have mastery of all 8 jhanas and lots of insight knowledge and all this stuff. But I've heard this, and of course, monastics that are at this level, they can't share their attainments. So them talking about this would probably break monastic rules, because they're not allowed to share attainments. But some super advanced lay practitioners have mentioned things like this. But what's worth saying about memory in this context of dreaming?
Yeah, like you said, it's really, really elusive, I think is a good word for it. It's really elusive. We have like maybe a primitive understanding of the fact that memory has something to do with the hippocampal region. in the brain, the midbrain, the limbic system or limbic area region now, and how the hippocampus plays a role in the memory. And I understand. I used to be partners with a neuropsychologist, and I was doing neurofeedback at the time with him. And one thing I learned from him was that when someone suffers from, let's say, like a depressive state, or if they've been suffering from like a chronic post-traumatic stress, their hippocampus starts to shrink from atrophy, like neuronal atrophy. And it actually grows in size as they get less depressed or less post-traumatic symptoms. So something to do with the hippocampus has to do with memory. And there's another author that I really enjoy reading a lot. I like his work a lot, Dan Siegel. He wrote a book. One of his books that he wrote that's like my favorite is called The Neurobiology of We. And he talks a lot about the development of the nervous system and memory. And one thing that he mentions in the book is that when someone is in a traumatic state or a high stress response, which might lead to like a post-traumatic state, they don't know where, like neuroscience, quote unquote, air quotes, they don't know where the memory is stored because the amygdala kind of they kind of bypass the hippocampus and go right into like a stress response. So the person's not really coding the moment-to-moment memory in a really terrifying situation. But once they get, let's say, treatment for post-trauma, all of a sudden those memories that were like suppressed or repressed come back again. And that always I found fascinating to me was that the memory gets stored still. Kind of like the sleep researcher about dreams. We remember every single dream I've ever had, every moment. It's just not, where is it stored? Who knows? So memory is a really tricky topic, and so is consciousness in general, like what that is. And the two are probably linked greatly, but because you kind of remember what you're conscious of. And even in like high stress states, when you're really stressed out, just even like neurologically, things start to shift in a high stress state, and consciousness becomes limited, conscious awareness and memory becomes limited, but it can be recovered. And that's the really like interesting part to me. And kind of going into what you were talking about, past life memory, all the memory, I think all the moments of waking life can probably, I would assume, be remembered. And our consciousness is just a sliver of this, or maybe, if I would say not conscious, maybe our mind is a certain degree of consciousness, what we're aware of, where our attentional centers are, what we're processing. But like everything on the peripheral is allegedly, I guess, still coded. It's still taken in. It's still, I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but there's something that's still absorbed as part of your experience that you're not even conscious or aware of, that can be recovered. So it's interesting.
It is really fascinating. In these books, like The Body Keeps the Score,
Yeah.
I had this one experience where I went into, I had some degree of meditation, maybe a couple of years, and I went into like this metaphysical place, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to, show off. And I, got this big spiritual ego going, right? And this healer comes right up to me and he says, oh, hey, you have resentment towards your father in your shoulder. And I'm just like, thank you. And so I knew there was something to it by the tone of my voice and how I responded. Yeah. But it turned out in my yoga practice, I couldn't get my shoulder or my arm all the way up, all the way. And so I took a look at this in meditation, and he was absolutely right. And there was a lot of weeping. And then after that, it's like something released in my shoulder, loosened up, and I was able to then go up, raise it all the way up. And I hear these things in yoga. People have these releases, certain things in the body, Peter Levine's work and things like this. Then we have this thing called the Akashic records, where people can go into this and get a lot of memories that they really wouldn't be able to say otherwise. And
Yeah.
Certain materials, they say, like crystals, some people say they store and transmit memory, and they've been able to store, just think of a computer device or magnetism. So yeah, I'm really above my pay grade on how that stuff. It's of course a
Yeah.
fascinating subject. And then the last thing around this little thread here is it really depends on how we define consciousness and
Hmm.
awareness and
Yeah.
mind. These are all important things to define, because I know a lot of people, they're similar, but a lot of people have different definitions of what these things are. But yeah.
Sure. Oh, yeah. And I have a friend, good friend, Roger. He does Traeger work, and he does it's body work, and he has many experiences of intuiting memory from the body when he works with people, and he gets flashes of this type of awareness or consciousness about their experiences in the body. And then one last thing about this, I read Ida Rolf with the Rolfing technique or Rolfing method.
Yes. Yeah.
Uh, and Stanislav Grof worked with her at one point to some capacity, and they talked about a concept called armoring, I think is what they called it, which is the body holding trauma memory or just memories in general, I guess, in there. So it's really it's a whole, like, kind of like you said, a whole nother podcast on like how the body holds memory and holds experiences and how it's like mind and body is no separation kind of idea.
So to tie this back to dreaming, does the way memory works in dreaming and waking life, does either shed light on any of the other? I know you kind of talked about how the memory tends to work in the dream world. Does that say anything about memory in general? I mean, it's so, I don't know. It's so mysterious. I don't know.
It is. I don't really know. I know that, like, I don't know why waking life would be so much more like our brains or the way that our central nervous system functions. I don't know why it'd be so much more amenable to waking life in terms of like placing more importance on that memory or experience. And in dream life, it isn't. Sometimes people will say that I don't have dreams. I've heard that a lot from people. I don't have dreams, but everybody does. It's just that they're not remembering them. And I don't know why the body wouldn't prioritize that.
I hear both of that too, and I think there's some theories like it's like a discharge of, I don't know, distortion during the day, or something where the brain gets a break, or a different mode or something where it gets a chance to heal or process information. These old classical ideas, and going back to the volition about having control in a dream. This is another fascinating thing, because some people, they say, well, we don't have free will, and, right. So at times it seems like I have a sense of agency, and sometimes it doesn't. It seems like some people have a greater sense of agency than others. So this is another fascinating topic too. The one thing I do seem to have some say in is what I pay attention to and how I pay attention to it, but not so much in the dream world unless it's a training towards this,
Yeah, it's that's almost could be considered under the umbrella of mindfulness, where like the more mindful you are of your sensory experience and your moment to moment experience and how much of your daily moment to moment life you can take in and how much awareness you can build up has a lot to do with that. I would imagine, because we're talking about dreaming and lucid dreaming, ultimately, whatever technique you use, however you approach it, the bottom line is you're maintaining an awareness. You're maintaining a level of awareness from sleeping to dreaming. And it's whatever you might try to do to increase that awareness. I think at the end of it all, it's just a mindfulness technique. It's just whether you're trying to stay conscious or aware while you're falling asleep, whether you're building up your memory. What is perspective memory really? It's really just a mindfulness around your moment to moment life and monitoring when something happens, you're going to be triggered to an awareness. It's really about, so a lot of meditators, both in person, I've met people that meditate a lot, you being one of them and other people. It's not uncommon that people that practice meditation and mindfulness have, and even through research, you can look it up, have kind of like this sort of like penchant for lucid dreaming, or they have kind of this ability to sort of cross into it easier than someone, that doesn't meditate or doesn't practice that level of awareness. So,
I definitely say it is about awareness. The more aware we are, the more likely it is to just be aware of anything, no matter what state we're in, right? I mean, we can be in really difficult states, and it just seems like there is a little bit more choice of what to pay attention to and how to pay attention to it. In general, because it's just like anything else. It's a training to be mindful. To know what's happening in the moment as it's happening. And then the next level is maybe without a lot of judgment or storytelling and commenting on it, just this bare awareness.
Yeah.